Today we're going to be talking about the angles of elevation and depression. So first of all, let's look at some pictures that identify what are the angles of elevation and what are angles of depression. So first of all, this is you, a little person down in the left-hand corner, and when you normally look out, you would look out in a straight horizontal line, okay? And so that would be your line of sight. Now for angles of depression and for angles of elevation both, you're going to have a horizontal line. Frequently, that line is going to be the line of sight, okay? Sometimes it's like the straight line that represents like ground level, or a straight line that represents like a ceiling or a floor, but a lot of times it's a line of sight. And we draw that line of sight with a dashed line because obviously it doesn't really exist. It's not something that's there. But we need it in order to be able to solve for the rest of the problem. Okay. Then you have this beautiful airplane up here. And so if instead of looking straight out in front of you, maybe at another friend over here, something like that, making eye contact with them. Instead, if you turn and you look up, okay, you have to elevate your gaze. So this angle here is an angle of elevation. And you can remember that elevators were created to help people go up, okay? It's not a big deal to go down. People can climb down things pretty easily. It's much harder to climb up something, especially if you have to carry something. So that's what an elevator is named for, okay? You can also think of it as like elevation, like a mountain, right? They have elevation levels, so you can remember it that way. Okay, so now let's talk about an angle of depression, right? So here you are again, and you've been out hiking near the Grand Canyon, and so you're standing up here. This big gap in the middle is the Grand Canyon. And this time, our horizontal line, so anyway, this is your horizontal line that is at ground level, okay? Then, from here, you've been able to measure in some way the angle of depression down to this bunny that's in the Grand Canyon. So this angle here is your angle of depression. Okay, so again, can't spell depression today. You're going to have a horizontal line, which I've represented with a red dashed line, and then you're going to have an angle that is measured down from that, okay? Another example of where you might see this, where you're using that line of sight, okay? Maybe if you are standing here and you have a tree over here, right? And say the bunny, instead of being at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, your little bunny friend was down here, okay? And so your normal line of sight would be straight across. And when you look down at the bunny here, again, you have an angle of depression. It's going to be really important that you draw a picture for these problems. It's going to be really important that even if they give you a picture in the book, that you draw that out and that you be able to recognize the right angle that's there, right triangle that's there. So let's go back and look at our pictures and see if we can identify a right triangle in each of them. Okay, so on this one, we have two lines already. So we have our blue line and our red dashed line. And our third line would be straight down here, and it would be the one that would be a straight vertical line, so it would make a right angle with our red dashed horizontal line. And so if we're looking at our right triangle here, we can now do anything that we could do before with right triangles. So, if they gave us the distance between the horizontal distance between the person and the plane. So they told us this horizontal distance is 8, and they told us, say, that from the plane to the person, okay, is 6 feet, right? And they wanted us to find the distance between the person and the plane. You have a couple of options here. You could use Pythagorean theorem. If you remember your Pythagorean triples, you could use that. If they didn't give you one of those two sides, so let's say instead of giving you the 6 here, but they gave you this angle measurement instead, the actual angle of elevation, they gave you a number there, so maybe 50 degrees or something, then you could use your trig functions to solve for that missing side. And so the trig functions are going to come in really handy here, and we'll practice a couple of those at the beginning of class tomorrow. But the biggest thing is going to be draw your picture and then make sure you can find your right triangle, because there will be right triangles in every one of these. Okay, so let's look at one of our angle of depression pictures. So on here, we have our angle of depression, and notice, I'm going to just highlight it in yellow. So we have a nice right triangle right here already fully drawn for us. So that's our right triangle. And again, they could give us the angle of depression, right? Say it's 45 degrees. And they could tell us that the distance across the Grand Canyon is 30 miles or something. I don't remember how far it is across, just made that up. And so then they might want to know, how deep is it to this bunny rabbit? And so you could use your trig functions, or you could say, oh, it's a 45, 45, 90 triangle, and I remember that the two legs on my 45, 45, 90 triangles have to be the same. So this is 30 miles down, which seems really deep, so probably not. Or you could do your trig functions, and you should get the same answer either way. So I could solve the same problem on this one anyway, 2 different ways, and I would still get the same answers. Okay, let's look at our last picture here. On this, the angle of depression, again, we have to find our right triangle. So the third line is going to be right here, and it's going to make a nice little right angle with the tree, and that's just the vertical distance from the person's line of sight down to the bunny rabbit. Okay. Another thing you're going to notice is that on some of these, you're going to end up with 2 horizontal lines. So, for example, one might be the person's line of sight, and another horizontal line might be ground level, and you could end up with this person, looks down and sees a dollar bill on the ground. Okay, and so there's your angle of depression, and we can see our nice little right triangle here. Okay, and maybe they ask us to find the height of the person. So the last piece of information you need to remember is that if this is a horizontal line of sight and we have the ground as horizontal, remember that those 2 lines then would be parallel lines. And this line that creates your angle of depression, right, because this is your angle of depression, but this this line that creates that angle of depression is like a transversal, right? So you have 2 parallel lines cut by a transversal. That means that this angle of depression and this angle of elevation, like the dollar bill could look back up at you, those have to be congruent. So if this is 35 degrees, then this one is 35 degrees. And so it doesn't matter if you find, the height from the person's line of sight down to the dollar bill here, or if you saw the right triangle here and used it to find the height to the person's line of sight. Either one of those would work, because you have 2 congruent triangles there. But I just wanted to be sure you noticed that you have 2 alternate interior angles that are congruent, because that's going to be really helpful when you draw some of your pictures and you're trying to find your sides. So again, tomorrow in class, we will look at a couple of specific examples and work through those. And I really appreciate you watching today. Thank you. Have a great day.